Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about the different types of connectors that are used in networking, and these connectors will vary depending upon the type of network and the cable that they are attached to. Whether that cable is twisted pair, coaxial, telephone, or fiber optic. And the first one we're going to talk about is the RJ45. Now the RJ45 is by far the most common network connector. Now this is an 8-pin connector that's used to connect computers and other network devices in a local area network. The RJ45 is used with unshielded twisted pair cable. Twisted pair cable has 8 wires, and these wires are arranged in a certain order, and then the wires are inserted into an RJ45 connector, and then they are crimped on both ends using a wire crimper. And then one connector would be plugged into the computer's network card, and then the other end would plug into a device, such as a switch, modem, or a router. Then once that is done, the computer will be able to connect to a network. The RJ45 has a single locking tab that locks itself into place. Now this is a UTP coupler. Now this is not really a connector. This is used for connecting UTP cables with RJ45 connectors to each other. This is typically used when running a longer cable is not an option. It's just used to extend a network cable by joining 2 cables together using their RJ45 connectors. So you would just plug one end of the cable into the coupler, and then you would plug in another cable on the other side. And now you have successfully extended your UTP cable. And another type of connector that is similar to the RJ45 is the RJ48. Now the RJ48 looks very similar to the RJ45, but the difference between the two is that the RJ48 is used with shielded twisted pair cable instead of unshielded twisted pair that's used with the RJ45. The RJ48 is primarily used with T1 lines, and it's also wired differently than the RJ45. And this is the RJ11 connector. This is a 4-wire connector that's mainly used to connect telephone equipment. But as far as networking, the RJ11 is used to connect computers to a local area network through the computer's modem. The RJ11 locks itself into place by a single locking tab, and it resembles the RJ45, but it's a little bit smaller. The BNC connector is a type of RJ connector that is used with coaxial cable. BNC stands for Bayonet Neil Consolman. And the BNC is used with both analog and digital video transmissions, as well as audio. Now these connectors are not very common anymore, but they can still be found on older networks. Now there are many different kinds of BNC connectors. So, for example, here is a BNCT connector which connects 3 coaxial cables together. And there is also the BNC coupler, which is used to connect 2 coaxial cables together. And there is also the BNC terminator, which is used to terminate the ends of a cable. Now this connector is called the F-type. Now this is a threaded connector typically used on coaxial cables. These are primarily used by cable providers to attach to cable modems. So if you have broadband cable like I do, you will have a modem with a coaxial cable attached to an F-type connector that screws into the back of your modem that attaches with a nut. And in addition to being used with broadband cable, they are also used with satellite internet. And there is also the USB connector. The USB is very common on desktops and laptops. And because universal is in its name, it can be used for many different purposes, including networking. So for example, many manufacturers make USB wireless adapters that plug into a USB port on a computer to give the computer wireless network access. And there's also wired network adapters like this one here, where you would plug an Ethernet cable at one end and then the other end into a USB port on a computer, and then the computer will be able to access a network through its USB port. So now we're getting into fiber optic connectors. Now fiber optic networks use pulses of light to send data. And there are many different types of fiber optic connectors, but I'm only going to talk about the most popular fiber connectors. But the main differences between these fiber connectors are the size and the method they use when coupling. So the first fiber optic connector is called the SC or standard connector. And this is often called the square connector. And this was one of the first connectors to be used in the marketplace. This uses a push-pull connector, similar to audio and video plugs, and these are commonly used between floors in a building. This connector is called the MRTJ, which stands for Mechanical Transfer Register Jack. And this is a fiber optic connector that uses a latched push-pull connection. It has a small form factor that's used for high pack density, and it was designed to replace the SC connector. The MRTJ uses 2 fibers in a single design, and it resembles the RJ45. This connector is becoming increasingly popular in fiber networks today. And our next fiber connector is called the LC or local connector or Lucent connector, since it was developed by Lucent. Now, this type of connector is also commonly used between floors in a building, and it was designed to compete with the SC connector. It's about half the size of the SC connector, which makes it better for highly populated racks and panels, and this also uses a latch that locks itself into place similar to the RJ45. And our last fiber optic connector is called the Saint or straight tip. Now, this uses a half-twist bayonet type of lock and is commonly used with single-mode fiber optic cable. Now, this is a large-size connector that was developed by AT&T. And because of its large size, its usage has declined in favor of smaller connectors, such as the LC and the MTRJ. Now, just like UTP couplers, there are also fiber couplers. So, if you wanted to join two fiber optic connectors, you would use a fiber coupler. Now, fiber couplers are used to join or couple two of the same fiber optic connectors, and the two connectors have to be the same. Now, these are not to be confused with fiber adapters, because fiber adapters are used for joining two different connectors together. So here we have an example of a fiber coupler joining two street connectors together. 754. So now we're going to talk about the difference between UPC and APC end faces or tips on fiber optic connectors. And as examples, we're going to use a group of Saint fiber connectors equipped with UPC and APC end faces. Now, when fiber optic connectors make a connection to each other, the point at which the connection is made is not perfect, because of the small imperfections of the flat surfaces. So what happens is at the point where the connectors join, light is transmitted from one connector to the other connector. But at the point where light passes to the other connector, the light will reflect back in the opposite direction towards the light source, and when this happens, there is signal loss. And this is what happens in UPC connectors. The light is reflected directly back. So as technology progressed, a new connector was developed to decrease the signal loss. And this new connector is called the APC connector. Now, the difference between the UPC and the APC is the angle of the end face or tip where the connection is made. So as I said before, with the UPC, the light reflects back towards the light source. But with the APC, with its angled connection, the light doesn't reflect back towards the light source, it reflects back at an angle into the wall of the cable. And as a result, this greatly reduces the signal loss. So thank you everyone for watching this video on network connectors. Please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and thank